The division vanished in 15 seconds. What you are about to hear is not just a war chronicle. It is the story of how a simple math teacher turned the laws of physics into the most terrifying weapon of the Second World War. In September of 1944, this officer did something that, by regulation, was punishable by execution. He destroyed his own battery, burned state-of-the-art equipment, and violated every conceivable order. But why did the general who arrived to court-martial him salute him instead? You will learn how to turn a Katyusha rocket launcher into a giant shotgun firing at point-blank range, and what happens to the human body when the air around it becomes as hard as concrete. But the most terrifying part awaits you at the end. What is the real price of salvation if you have to pay for it with your sanity? Watch until the finale. This math will overturn your understanding of war. September 1944, Belarus. The earth here isn't just trembling, it is convulsing, like a living organism infected by a virus. This is not a metaphor. This is the physics of shockwave propagation in swampy soil. German tanks have breached the defensive line and are heading for the communications hub. The distance is closing by the second. You don't need binoculars anymore to see the grey boxes with crosses on their sides. 400 meters. 350. The air smells of burnt diesel and the animal fear that the human body releases a moment before death. There is no barrage artillery. There are no shells. There are only 4 BM-13 launchers, which, by regulation, are not designed for combat at such close range. The Katyusha is an instrument of the apocalypse, created to work on large areas from a distance of kilometers. It is not a sniper rifle. It is a steel oblong brain solving the problem of destroying grid squares, not points. But now the mission has changed. An equation with 3 unknowns must be solved under heavy fire when the whistle of shrapnel drowns out thought. Senior Lieutenant Ilyin looks at approaching death. There is no panic in his head, no room for prayer or bidding farewell to the motherland. Only numbers work there. A cold mind fixes the variables: target speed, distance, elevation angle. The problem is in the mechanics. The launch rail pack of the rocket launcher is mounted in such a way that it cannot be lowered to a horizontal position for direct fire. The designers did not anticipate that Guards' mortars would be used as anti-tank guns. A locking mechanism blocks the rails at a certain degree so that the jet stream at launch does not incinerate the cabin and gas tank. To shoot now means sending the entire payload into the blue, over the turrets of the German tanks. The manual categorically forbids such experiments. For violating the rules of operation of entrusted equipment, court-martial. But the court-martial will be later, if there is a later. Right now, there is only impending catastrophe. Ilyin makes a decision that contradicts all instructions, but corresponds to the laws of ballistics. If the rails cannot be lowered by the mechanism, the angle of the platform itself must be changed. The geometry of space against the mechanics of the machine. Back! Ilyin's voice breaks into a wheeze, but cuts through the roar of explosions. Drive them into the pits! The drivers of the Studebakers look at him with wild eyes. This is madness. This is a violation of their oath. But they do not see a commander. They see a function, outputting the only correct algorithm for survival. The engines roar. The 3-axle American trucks, the draft horses of this war, begin to back up. The soldiers of the crew grab shovels. This is not infantry entrenching. This is a surgical operation on the landscape. They need to dig ramps for the rear wheels, so that the stern of the truck falls down, pointing the nose of the cabin toward the sky. Only in this way will the rails lie parallel to the ground. Only in this way will the thrust vectors of the rockets coincide with the plane in which the German tanks are moving. Mud flies into their faces. Shovels grind against stones. Every movement is a struggle against the resistance of matter. A 122mm high-explosive shell bursts 30 meters away. The shockwave knocks 2 men off their feet. One does not get up. There is no blood, but the body has gone limp, as if the frame was yanked out of it. Barotrauma. Broken bones, ruptured lungs. War is not shooting. It is the erasure of matter. Ilian does not look at the dead man. He looks at the inclinometer. He does not need people. He needs working units of force capable of deepening the rut by another 20 centimeters. Faster! The ground is soft. Give it gas! The Studebaker howls with effort, the tread biting into the slurry of the Belarusian swamp. The rear axle sinks. The frame groans from the torque, metal cracking, experiencing loads for which engineers in Detroit did not calculate it. The rails go down with a screech. A little more. Ilian sees the geometry changing. Now the tubes are looking not at the zenith, but straight into the forehead of the crawling armored armada. It is no longer a platform for delivering wrath over the horizon. It is a giant shotgun pressed against the enemy's temple. Fear paralyzes. The crews work on reflexes hammered in by months of drill, but now their actions are dictated by animal terror transformed into feverish activity. Hands tremble, but fingers remember their work. Wrenches tighten bindings. The control cable uncoils in the mud. The Germans are close. 300 meters. You can see the turrets turning. The black pupils of German guns are searching for targets. They see trucks stuck in pits. For a German gunner, this is an easy target. Stationary, defenseless equipment. He does not know that in a minute this equipment will turn the landscape into the surface of the moon. Ilian stands next to the lead vehicle. There is no weapon in his hand. His weapon is the knowledge of trajectories. He checks the data. An error of half a degree at this distance is not critical for an area, but critical for life. M13 rockets are 42 kilograms of weight each, almost 5 kilograms of explosives. Upon detonation, fragments heated to the melting point of steel fly apart at a speed exceeding the speed of sound. These are not just damaging elements. This is shrapnel that ignores the laws of humanism. The horror of the situation lies in its static nature before the explosion. Seconds stretch into eternity. Ilian hears his heart beating. Thump, thump, thump. Each beat counts down the time remaining until the moment when either they turn into ash or they turn others into ash. Mathematics liberates. In his head, there is no room for pity for himself or the enemy. There are only coordinates and trajectory. The kill zone is defined. The tanks are entering the zone of guaranteed destruction. They think they are the hunters, but mathematics has already passed sentence on them. The rails are lowered. The wheels are in the pits. The machines are frozen in unnatural poses, like wounded beasts crouching to the ground before a jump. The crews run for cover. Staying in the cabin or nearby is suicide. The temperature of the gases at launch is such that paint melts. The sound pressure ruptures eardrums. Ilian stays to watch. He needs to see the result. It is a professional deformation. He must record the accuracy of the equation's solution. The silence before the volley is deceptive. It is taut as a string, ready to snap and lash across the face. The Germans open fire. A machine gun burst kicks up fountains of mud near the wheels of the outermost truck. A shell whistles overhead. It has begun. Time has compressed into a dot. Fire! Ilian screams, but does not hear his own voice. His command is not a sound. It is the closing of an electrical circuit. Contact. The relay trips. Igniters in the base of the rocket chambers receive an impulse. Solid fuel transitions from a state of rest to a state of rage in fractions of a second. Pressure in the combustion chambers spikes to critical values. Newton's law comes into force. Action equals reaction. The jet stream bursts out, sweeping away everything behind the trucks, burning the grass, evaporating moisture, turning the soil into glass. This is not shooting. This is a volcanic eruption in a horizontal plane. The first rocket leaves the rail. Behind it, the second, the third. The interval is fractions of a second. The hum grows into a roar that you feel not with your ears, but with your rib cage, your diaphragm, every bone in your skeleton. Smoke obscures everything, but through this smoke, the fiery tails of comets are visible, leaving parallel to the ground. They do not fly in an arc. At this distance, their flight is a straight line, a line drawn by the red-hot graphite of fate. The trucks in the pits shudder, dancing in their earthen traps. Springs bow out. If the wheels were not buried, the recoil would flip the trucks over. Elian's mathematics holds them to the earth. The rockets go to the target. 96 deaths rush to meet German armor. The equation is solved. It remains to see the answer. The answer to this equation, written in fire in a Belarusian swamp in 1944, began to form 3 years before that. In another life, in another world, where silence was measured not by pauses between volleys, but by the scratch of chalk on a blackboard. June, 1941. A school classroom in central Russia. The air here is dry, soaked in the smell of dust and old paper. Nikolai Ilyin stands at the blackboard. In his fingers is a piece of white limestone. He traces a parabola, an ideal curve describing the flight of a body thrown at an angle to the horizon. For him, this is an abstraction, the pure beauty of function y of x. In this formula, there is no projectile mass, no air resistance, no density of human flesh that this parabola must intersect at the endpoint. This is sterile mathematics, the science of ideal objects that do not exist in reality. Ilyin loves this purity. It is safe. It is predictable. If you haven't made a mistake in the calculations, the result will always be correct. The world outside the window is flooded with sunlight, and the math teacher's biggest problem is the student in the back row who cannot master the simplest trigonometric identities. The sound that destroyed this universe was not an explosion. It was a voice from a loudspeaker. Molotov. The words fell heavily, like bricks, breaking the fragile construction of peaceful life. The chalk in Ilyan's fingers crunched and broke. White crumbs showered onto the dark floor. This sound, crumbling limestone, would become the first sound of his war. Later, he would hear it again, only it wouldn't be chalk breaking, but the concrete of bunkers and the bones of infantry. But for now, he looks at his hands. They are white with chalk dust. In a month, they will be black with gun grease and powder soot. The recruitment office meets him with chaos. This is not the ordered structure of an army. It is a boiling cauldron of human fear and bureaucratic inevitability. The smell of sweat, cheap tobacco, and wet wool. Hundreds of men, torn from the context of their lives, stand in lines at tables piled with papers. There are no names here, only categories of fitness. The commissar, a tired major with eyes red from lack of sleep, looks at Ilyin like a piece of meat to be sent into the meat grinder of the infantry. The Mosin rifle is simple: bolt, trigger, bayonet. A math teacher is not needed there. They need someone who can run and stab. Rifle Corps. The major hovers the stamp over the personal file. I have a degree from the physics and mathematics faculty. Ilian's voice is quiet, intellectual, out of place here. I know ballistics. Theoretical. The major's hand freezes. The stamp does not descend. War is not just bayonet charges. War is geometry at huge distances. The army is catastrophically short of people capable of distinguishing sine from cosine, capable of working with a slide rule faster than German tanks can travel a kilometer. Artillery. The major changes his decision. To training. If you're lying, you'll go to a penal battalion to clear minefields with your feet. Training ground. July 1941. Here mathematics ceases to be an abstraction. It gains weight, caliber, and smell. Ilian is issued not a rifle, but an artillery plotting board and firing tables. The tables are the Bible of the god of war. A thick book where every page is filled with columns of numbers. Angle of elevation, full charge, reduced charge, drift correction, wind correction, temperature correction. Ilian flips through these pages and sees familiar patterns, but now they frighten him. Before, a calculation error meant a failing grade in the gradebook. Now an error in the third decimal place means the shell will land on his own trenches. He is taught to work with an aiming circle. This is a complex optical mechanical instrument for orienting guns and scouting targets. Brass, glass, levels with air bubbles. A precise instrument requiring delicacy. But it has to be handled in the mud, in the rain, with rough movements. The instructor, a captain with a shrapnel scar on his cheek, does not explain the theory. He hammers in algorithms. "The gun is not a machine," he yells when Ilian hesitates with calculations. "The gun is a steel, oblong brain solving the task of destruction. You are its operator. If you are slow, the brain dies along with you." First live fire. 122mm howitzer, model 1938. M30. Squat, predatory, smelling of heavy grease. Ilian stands at the gunner's position. He needs to align the crosshairs of the panoramic sight with the aiming point. His hands tremble. This is not fear of death. It is fear of responsibility before physics. He turns the hand wheels. The metal chills his palms. The breech clangs, driving the casing into the chamber. "Fire!" Ilian pulls the lanyard. At that moment, the world disappears. The shockwave is not a sound. It is a dense physical object that hits you in the chest, knocking the air out of your lungs. The ground jumps, knocking him off his feet. The roar is such that it seems the membrane separating reality from madness has burst. Smoke, the acrid yellowish smoke of pyroxylin powder, clogs the nasopharynx. Ilian gulps air, trying to understand if he is alive. Ringing in his ears drowns out all the sounds of the world. He looks forward, to where a second and a half ago there was a grassy hillside. There is now a black ulcer, a crater. The earth is turned inside out, tree roots sticking up like severed veins. Ilian walks to the edge of the crater. Heat radiates from it. The earth is smoking. He sees the result of his formula, the very parabola he drew with chalk. Only now the variable x is the distance, and the variable y is the depth of destruction. He understands a terrible thing. His knowledge, his beloved science, which he wanted to teach children, serves only one purpose here: killing, destruction, annihilation. Mathematics is no longer innocent. It has taken up an axe. He looks at his hands. They are still trembling. But this is no longer the trembling of a teacher. It is the vibration of a mechanism that has just completed a working cycle. He wipes sweat from his forehead, leaving a dirty smear on his skin. "Short 20 meters!" screams the instructor, his voice breaking through the cotton in his ears. "Enter correction! Why are you frozen? Calculate!" Ilian returns to the panoramic sight. He no longer thinks about the nature of the function. He thinks about mills, about the divisions of the goniometer, about the weight of the shell. He begins to calculate, quickly, coldly, without emotion. In this moment, the teacher, Nikolai Ilian, dies. A calculator is born, a unit of the combat crew, a man function. He enters the correction. The second shell is already in the barrel. The breech closes with the same clang as a coffin lid slamming shut. The parabola must be constructed precisely. The price of a mistake is life. And now he knows what the correct answer looks like. It looks like scorched earth. September 1941. Southwestern Front. Retreat. This word does not convey the essence of what is happening. It is not an organized withdrawal to prepared positions. It is a migration of huge masses of metal and flesh to the east, driven by the fear of encirclement. Roads are clogged. Shoulders are littered with abandoned equipment that ran out of fuel or blew its clutches. The air is thick with dust raised by thousands of boots and wheels. Dust grits on the teeth, clogs the folds of tunics, settles on optics. Captain Gromov, the battery commander, looks like a man who hasn't slept since the creation of the world. His face is gray, the color of that roadside dust, his eyes inflamed, red like an albino rabbit's. Gromov smokes a hand-rolled cigarette with such greed, as if he wants to inhale all the smoke and die of a nicotine stroke, just so he doesn't have to look at the map. On the map is a catastrophe. Red arrows are tearing, blue wedges are closing. Gromov teaches Ilian not tactics. Tactics are taught in academies with parquet floors and silence. Gromov teaches the survival of sanity. He sees the former math teacher shaking. Not from the cold. September is still warm. He is shaking from the realization of the cause and effect relationship. His calculations kill living people. "What are you doing, Lieutenant?" Gromov's voice is dry, like the crack of a breaking branch. Ilian looks up from the plotting board. "Calculating the correction for target movement, Comrade Captain. Infantry column. Walking speed." "I'm not talking about numbers," Gromov interrupts. "I see your eyes. You are imagining them. Right now you are thinking not about speed, but about the fact that the German in the third row might have a photo of his Frau in his pocket. Or children in Bavaria." Ilian is silent. He really is imagining it. A teacher's habit of seeing a personality, a story in every person. "Forget it," Gromov spits out tobacco. "If you imagine the German's eyes at the point of impact, you'll go crazy. In a week you'll put a bullet in your temple, or you'll start missing so you don't take the sin on your soul. And then they will come here and kill us." Gromov steps in close. He smells of sour sweat, gun oil, and cheap alcohol. "Listen to the main rule of artillery. Out there, in the field, there are no people. There are no fathers, no sons, no musicians or carpenters. There are targets. Group and single, soft and armored, stationary and moving. Your task is to align the trajectory of a steel slug with the coordinates of the object. It's geometry, Ilian. Just geometry. Horror paralyzes. Math liberates. There is only X, Y, and time of flight." 2 hours later, theory becomes practice. Reconnaissance reports. Enemy motorized infantry is moving along a dirt road parallel to the forest belt. Distance, 6 kilometers. No direct line of sight from the battery. Indirect fire. This is the higher mathematics of war, killing someone you can't even see. Ilyin stands at the aiming circle. He needs to solve the problem. Given target coordinates, battery coordinates, weather conditions. Wind is cross, gusty, 5 meters per second. This is important. At a distance of 6,000 meters, the wind drift of the shell will be tens of meters. If ignored, a miss. He picks up the slide rule. The cursor slides along the scale. Numbers, logarithms, signs. Before, these instruments served to calculate the area of fields or the volume of shapes. Now, they determine the meeting point of metal and biological mass. Fingers tremble. A treacherous tremor that cannot be stilled by willpower. A cold lump in the stomach. Nausea rises to the throat. The organism resists. Genetic memory screams, "Do not kill." But the brain, trained by years of solving equations, works autonomously.
Elevation 120, deflection 30, 0. Sheaf, 3 rounds per gun.
Ilyin's voice breaks into a falsetto. Commands are repeated by gun commanders. The clang of breeches. Heavy, blunt shells weighing 21 kilograms, 760 grams, are sent into the chambers. Casings with the charge follow. Click. Ready. Fire! The volley of 4 guns merges into one strike of a hammer on an anvil. The earth shudders. Dust rises in a wall. Barrel recoil, ejection of casings. Hot brass smokes in the grass. Ilyin does not look at the guns. He looks at the stopwatch. The hand runs in a circle. 1 second. 2. 3. The shells are now at the highest point of their trajectory. They hang in the sky, overcoming air resistance to begin falling down. 17 seconds of flight. Eternity. In these 17 seconds, Ilyin fights his imagination. He tries not to see the shells entering the dense mass of people. The high explosive effect of a 122mm shell is terrible. Upon detonation, it creates a zone of continuous destruction with a radius of up to 30 meters. The shockwave tears tissue, breaks bones, pops eyes out with pressure. Shrapnel, jagged pieces of steel, slices through everything in its path. The spotter is on the line, crackling interference and a voice distorted by the membrane in the headphones. Short 100, left 05. First volley, ranging. Error. Ilyin feels sweat flowing down his back in an icy stream. He made a mistake in the calculations. That means right now, in these seconds, the Germans are jumping off trucks, scattering, seeking cover. Living targets are turning into difficult targets. Easy, Gromov says in his ear. Correction. Fast. Don't think about them. Think about the formula. Ilyin exhales. The world narrows to the scale of the slide rule. He moves the cursor. Drop elevation 1 division. Shift left.
Fire for effect! Fire!
Second volley. Third. Fourth. The battery enters a rhythm. It is a conveyor belt. Loaders, wet with sweat, with black faces, throw metal into the voracious maws of the howitzers. Carriers haul crates. Gun commanders wave flags. Cease fire! Record! The voice in the headphones changes. Now there is no tension in it, only a businesslike statement of fact. Coverage, target suppressed, equipment burning, no movement observed. Ilyin lowers his binoculars, although nothing is visible through them due to the forest belt. The battle is over. Somewhere out there, 6 kilometers away, a mess of twisted iron and torn flesh lies on the road. 100, maybe 150 people have ceased to exist. And he did it. Not the soldiers pulling the lanyards, but he. The man who solved the equation of the meeting of 2 points in space and time. Nausea recedes. In its place comes a strange, ringing emptiness. He looks at his hands. They are no longer trembling. The trembling left, along with his humanity. Gromov hands him a flask. "Drink. To your baptism, Lieutenant." Ilian takes a sip. The alcohol burns his throat, but gives no warmth. Inside him, a different mechanism is now working. Inside him, a calculating machine is being born. Cold, precise, ruthless. He takes out a notepad and pencil. Need to record ammunition expenditure. 12 shells per gun. Total 48. 48 variables that were crossed out of the equation of life. He writes the number 48 with a steady hand. The graphite does not break. Autumn flowed into the winter of 1941 not smoothly, but with a jerk, as if someone turned off the heat switch. The Battle of Moscow. Here, the war finally lost the features of maneuverable art and turned into heavy, monotonous work of attrition. The landscape changed. Instead of mud and autumn slush, an icy crust, hard as concrete,
The air temperature drops to -30 degrees Celsius.
For artillery, this is not just discomfort. It is a change in physical constants. Air density increases. Resistance to shell flight increases. Table values, correct for normal conditions, become lies here in the cold. If a temperature correction is not introduced, the shell will fall short, missing the target by hundreds of meters. Lubricant in the gun mechanisms thickens. Spindle oil turns into sticky glue, slowing the bolt operation. Recoil systems, hydraulic brakes damping the monstrous energy of the shot, become rigid. The stiol fluid loses fluidity. Every shot now is a risk of rupturing the carriage. Metal in such cold becomes brittle as glass. Shock loads that the howitzer swallowed without choking in summer can now crack the breach. Senior Lieutenant Ilyin stands at the observation post. He is wearing a sheepskin coat, but the cold cuts to the bone. He can't feel his toes. His face is wrapped in a wool scarf covered in frost from his breath. His eyelashes stick together, but his brain works sharply, cutting off the body's sensory signals. Pain, cold, hunger. This is background noise. Only the signal matters. Enemy column on the Volokolamsk direction. Through binoculars, a black snake is visible crawling across the white plain. German motorized infantry. Trucks, armored personnel carriers, fuel tankers. They move in a tight formation, confident in their impunity. Distance, 8 kilometers. Column speed, 40 kilometers per hour. Task, calculate the lead. The shell needs time to fly these 8,000 meters. 24 seconds of flight. In these 24 seconds, a German vehicle will travel 266 meters. If you aim the gun directly at the lead vehicle and fire, the shell will fall into emptiness, where the Germans were half a minute ago. You need to shoot into the void ahead of them, into a point where they are not yet, but where they are obligated to be according to the laws of kinematics. Ilyin takes out his slide rule. It is his primary tool, a wooden slat with a cursor and numbers. In such frost, you cannot touch metal parts of optical instruments with a bare hand. Skin sticks instantly, tearing off with the flesh. But working with the rule in mittens is impossible. Ilyin takes off his mitten. Fingers are white, stiff, looking like frozen sausages. He struggles to move the cursor. The wood of the rule creaks. Cold changes even the geometry of measuring instruments, but these microns of error are nothing compared to the trembling of hands. Ilyin bites his lip until it bleeds to return concentration through pain. Target speed, angle of sight, headwind, strong. It breaks the shell, blows it off trajectory. Another variable in the equation of death. Elevation 108. Deflection, left 010.
Lead 2 figures.
Commands are transmitted to the battery by phone. The wire lies in the snow, black on white, like a nerve connecting the brain and the fist. At the battery, soldiers work like automatons. They do not see the target. They see only breaches and levels. For them, war is heavy lifting. Lift the shell, 22 kilograms. Shove into the barrel. Close the bolt. Pull the lanyard. Eject the hot casing. Repeat. And so for hours. A factory. A factory for the disposal of ammunition and enemy manpower.
Battery, volley fire! Fire!
4 howitzers bark simultaneously. The sound of the shot in the cold is different. Dry, sharp, whipping. The echo doesn't wander. It dies in the dense, frosty air almost instantly. Snow around the guns flies up in a cloud, exposing the frozen black earth. The smoke of the shots is white, thick. It does not disperse for a long time, hanging over the position in ragged clumps. Ilian presses the binoculars to his eyes. Now he waits. 24 seconds. He sees the column, little black dots on a white sheet. Inside these dots are people. They smoke, freeze, think about a warm bed in captured Moscow. They are alive. Their hearts pump blood. Their neurons transmit impulses. But for Ilian, they are already dead. Mathematically, they are destroyed. The shells are already in the air, and their trajectory cannot be changed. Fate has already flown out of the barrel. Explosions bloom on the snow like dirty gray buds. Accurate. Mathematics did not fail. The shells landed at the head of the column. The first truck flares up like a matchbox. It is spun across the road, blocking movement for the rest. The column halts. The terrain fold turns into a trap. Forest on the left, deep ravine on the right. Nowhere to go.
Fire for effect! Fire!
Now there is no need to calculate lead. The target is stationary. Now it is simply work on an area. Methodical hammering of explosives into a designated grid square. Ilian watches. Through the optics, he sees the black spot of the column turning into a burning, moving mess. People jump out of vehicles, run through deep snow. They get bogged down to the waist. These are ideal conditions for shrapnel. The shell bursts in the air, above heads, showering everything below with a steel rain of lead balls. On the white snow, black figures fall and do not get up again. Red spots spread, but from this distance they are not visible. Only the disturbance of the whiteness is visible. Ilian feels no triumph. There is no joy of victory. There is only the satisfaction of a correctly solved problem. Like in school, when the answer at the back of the textbook matched your solution. Only here, the textbook is written in blood, and a failing grade is your own death. His fingers are completely numb. He struggles to pull on the mitten. Need to record the result. He takes out a notepad. The paper crunches from the frost. The pencil leaves a pale mark on the frozen sheet with difficulty. Column dispersed. Up to 15 units of equipment destroyed. Manpower losses, up to 2 companies. 200 people. 200 unique universes collapsed into a dry line of a report. Statistics. Ilian looks at the burning skeletons of the vehicles. Smoke rises vertically up into the icy sky. War has become routine. It is no longer a feat, not a tragedy, not a drama. It is a job. A dirty, cold, heavy job of a sanitation worker of history. He just needs to clear this square of the enemy's presence. He closes the notepad. The cold penetrates under the sheepskin coat, but the internal cold is stronger. It is the cold of emptiness, where emotions used to be. Now there are only numbers there. And this cold cannot be warmed by alcohol or a potbelly stove. This cold will stay with him forever. Shift position, he wheezes into the telephone receiver. We've been spotted. German artillery begins ranging. Shells land short, throwing up fountains of frozen earth. Must leave. Pack up the aiming circle, reel in the wires, hitch the guns to the tractors. Drag, push, tear veins again. The conveyor does not stop. The mathematics of death demands new data. 1942. Stalingrad. Here the laws of classical war ceased to apply. This is not a battlefield. It is a labyrinth of broken brick, rebar, and human bodies. Distances have shrunk to the absurd. The front runs not along a river and not on a map, but along a staircase landing. We are in the kitchen, the Germans are in the bedroom. Artillery, accustomed to working on areas from concealed positions, goes blind here. Trajectory parabolas slam into the walls of neighboring houses. The god of war is driven into basements and forced to fight at pistol range. Senior Lieutenant Ilyin sits in the semi-ruined basement of a building that was once a department store. Plaster rains down from above. Every 10 minutes the earth shakes so that the pencil lead jumps on the paper. The Luftwaffe methodically wipes the city off the face of the earth. Junkers 87, Stukas, hang overhead constantly. Their howl, that Jericho trumpet of sirens welded to the landing gear, drives the infantry crazy. A psychological weapon, turning fear into physical pain. There are no anti-aircraft guns. They are either destroyed or cut off on the other bank of the Volga. The infantry presses to the ground, praying that the bomb falls in the neighboring square. And then comes the order from General Rodimtsev, an order that in any other situation would be considered the raving of a madman. Use divisional artillery to combat enemy aviation. M30 howitzers against dive bombers. A 122mm cannon, created for destroying bunkers and suppressing manpower, must shoot down a plane. It has neither the traverse speed, nor the automation, nor the anti-aircraft sight. It is like trying to kill a fly with a sledgehammer. But in Stalingrad, the word impossible is excluded from the lexicon. If there is an order, a solution must be found. Ilyin does not argue. He takes the firing table and the ammunition handbook. Shrapnel. The old, good shell SH-354T. Inside the steel casing is a bullet filling, hundreds of lead balls set in resin. On the nose is a remote fuse T6. It is a mechanical timer. You turn the ring, setting the time after which the expelling charge will trigger, and the casing will turn into a giant caliber shotgun. The task boils down to the geometry of the intersection of two vectors, the vector of the diving Junkers and the vector of the shrapnel cloud. The Germans are arrogant. They feel impunity. They approach the target on the same trajectory, as if on rails. Ilyin watches them for 2 hours, timing with a stopwatch. Turn, dive, drop, exit. Dive angle, 60 degrees.
Exit speed,
About 400 kilometers per hour. Point of pullout from the dive, altitude 300 to 400 meters, right above the ruins of the mill. This is the X in the equation, the meeting point. Ilyin calculates. His fingers are dirty, scraped, but the movements on the slide rule are smooth. The fuse must be set to such a time that the shell explodes exactly at that point in space where the nose of the German plane will be in 1.5 seconds. An error of 1/10 of a second, and the lead rain will pass by. Fuse, Ilyin commands. Setting, 22. Deflection, standard. Elevation, fixed. The crew looks at him with disbelief. The loader, a huge Siberian with a bandaged head, turns the heavy shell in his hands. "Comrade Senior Lieutenant, shooting sparrows?" "Vultures," Eileen cuts him off. "Load." The gun is rolled into a breach in the wall. The barrel is cranked up to the maximum possible angle. The trails rest against a pile of broken brick. If the calculation is wrong, the recoil will destroy the remains of the wall and bury them all. Wait. The scariest thing in war is waiting for death to fall on you. The sound grows. First a hum, like the buzzing of an angry hornet. Then it grows into a howl. The siren turns on. The Junkers enters a dive. The sound presses on the ears, penetrates the stomach, causes nausea. Instinct demands to run, burrow into the ground, become invisible. But you cannot run. Eileen does not look at the sky. He looks at the second hand of his watch. The plane falls from the sky like a stone. It is already visible in the breach. A predatory silhouette with fixed landing gear looking like bird claws. "Fire!" The howitzer jumps. Flame bursts from the barrel, illuminating the dark basement. In the enclosed space, the sound of the shot concusses. Blood flows from ears, but there is no pain. The shell goes into the sky. The timer inside the T6 fuse begins the countdown. Springs, gears, burning powder composition. A mechanism created by watchmakers for murder. The German pilot sees the flash on the ground. He probably grins. Russians shooting cannons at the sky out of desperation. He pulls the stick back, pulling out of the dive. G-force presses him into the seat. He thinks he has won. But mathematics is faster than reflexes. The shell explodes exactly in the plane's path. The explosion of the expelling charge throws forward a cone of shrapnel. 800 lead bullets, each the weight of a pistol bullet, create a dense wall of metal in the air. The density of fire at this point in space exceeds all conceivable limits. The plane slams into this wall at a speed of 400 kilometers per hour. This is not an aerial dogfight. This is a collision of a tin can with a cement mixer. The canopy shatters into dust. The engine turns into a sieve. The propeller, breaking blades on lead, turns into a useless stump. The pilot dies instantly, turned into mince by 100 hits. The Junkers loses control. It is no longer a machine. It is a burning piece of duralumin, obeying only gravity. It crashes into a neighboring building, scattering in a fiery firework. A wing, torn off by the impact, falls onto the pavement, with a crash sounding like applause. Silence. In the basement, only the heavy breathing of the crew and the clatter of falling casings are heard. Eileen lowers his binoculars. His hands are calm. The equation balanced. An absurd task received a logical solution. "Reload!" Eileen's voice is dry as Stalingrad dust. "Fuse the same. Waiting for the next one." General Rodimtsev was right. There are no rules in hell. There is only survival. And if to survive you need to shoot down planes with howitzers, they will do it. Intellect defeated brute force. Mathematics proved stronger than aviation gasoline. Eileen makes a note in his notebook. Expenditure, 1 shrapnel shell. It was not luck. It was calculation. Cold, precise calculation of a man who learned to see trajectories where others saw only death. Belarus, September 1944. Time, which compressed into a single point before the launch button was pressed, now explodes. An electrical impulse runs along the wires at the speed of light, reaching the pyrotechnic cartridges in the base of the rockets. What happens in the next 15 seconds cannot be called a battle. Battle implies the possibility of a response, a tactical maneuver, a chance for survival. Here, there are no chances. Here, pure thermodynamics of destruction works. 4 BM-13 launchers, 16 rails on each, total 64 rockets in the first echelon of the volley. 96 total rockets mentioned in the mission imply a reloading or simplified description of saturation fire. 96 shells of 132mm caliber tear away from their spots. The roar is not heard. The human ear has a decibel limit. When this limit is passed, the brain turns off the sound, replacing it with dull, cottony pressure that bursts capillaries in the nose and ears. Ilian stands with his mouth wide open to equalize pressure, otherwise his eardrums will tear like cigarette paper. He sees the space in front of the trucks distort. The air turns into a trembling haze. Rocket jets burn out the oxygen, creating vacuum pockets that immediately collapse with new claps. The Studebakers, their rear axles driven into pits, thrash in agony. Shock absorbers are compressed to the limit. Frames creak, metal groans, experiencing extreme vibrations. It seems the trucks will fall apart into bolts and nuts right now. Paint on the rails begins to bubble and blacken. The temperature of the exhaust gases is thousands of degrees. The grass around the positions disappears instantly, turning into gray ash. The mud in which the wheels are buried bakes into a ceramic crust.
The rockets go with an interval of fractions of a second.
These are not single shots. It is a continuous stream of steel and fire. From a distance of 400 meters, the ballistic curve degenerates into a straight line. The shells do not fall from above. They fly parallel to the ground, at the level of a man's height, sweeping away everything in their path. It is a wall of explosives and red-hot metal moving faster than sound. German tankers manage to see the flash. Maybe they even manage to realize this is the end. But they do not manage to do anything. Not turn the turret, not press the gas pedal, not open the hatch. Human reaction speed is 0.2 of a second. The flight speed of an M13 rocket is 355 meters per second. At a distance of 400 meters, they have a little more than a second of life. The first rockets slam into the lead tank. Detonation. The warhead of the shell is 4 kilograms 900 grams of TNT. But here, not just one shell is working. Here the principle of cumulative addition of shockwaves works. Dozens of explosions merge into one giant impulse. The armor of a tiger or panther is not pierced by a shaped charge jet. The BM-13 hits with high explosive force. But the force of the blow is such that welds burst. The turret, weighing several tons, is torn from the ring and thrown to the roadside like a lid from a pot. Road wheels are torn out together with torsion bars. The insides of the tank turn into an acoustic death chamber. The crew does not die from shrapnel. They are killed by the pressure differential. The liquid medium of the organism boils. The infantry following behind simply disappears. The temperature at the epicenter of the explosion is such that organic matter evaporates, leaving not even bodies. Only shadows remain on the armor and charred fragments of gear. The shockwave at such a distance works like a giant press. It breaks bones, ruptures lungs, turns internal organs into jelly, even if a fragment did not touch the skin. Within the blast radius of the volley, the air becomes solid. This is not a metaphor. The density of air compressed by the explosion is comparable to the density of wood. The impact of this air wall is equivalent to being hit by a log with a full swing. A firestorm covers the road. Trees along the roadside do not break. They are sheared off at the root by the stream of fragments like a giant scythe. The earth rises in a wall. Black soil mixed with metal, snow, and blood hangs in the air as a solid curtain. 15 seconds. Exactly that much is needed to fire the entire payload. The last rocket leaves the rail with a hiss, leaving a smoky tail behind it. And immediately, silence falls. It is scarier than the roar. It is a dead, vacuum silence in which there is no sound of birds, no wind, no moans of the wounded. There is no one to moan. In the kill zone, there are no living. Eileen takes his hands away from his ears. He hears nothing except a thin, piercing ringing inside his skull. It is the overloaded auditory nerves singing. He looks at his hands. Blood is oozing from under his fingernails. He gripped the railings so hard he tore the skin. Red drips from his nose onto the dirty snow. Concussion. Mild. He'll live. The smoke begins to settle. Slowly, reluctantly, revealing the picture of what used to be a road. There is no road there. It is a lunar landscape. Craters overlap each other, forming a continuous field of plowed earth. Only the geometry of wreckage remains of the German column. Twisted sheets of metal, smoking skeletons that can no longer be identified as tanks or trucks. The smell is unbearable. It is not the smell of gunpowder. It is the sweet, sickening smell of burnt meat mixed with the aroma of burnt rubber and red-hot iron. "Water," someone rasps nearby. Eileen turns his head. The loader is sitting on the ground, leaning against the wheel of a Studebaker. His face is black with soot, his eyes white, mad. He is shaking. Eileen looks at the rails. They are gray, burnt, the paint peeled off in rags. The metal is still smoking, cooling and crackling. The machines fulfilled their function. They delivered wrath. Now, it is just a pile of tired iron. Eileen takes a step forward. His legs are cotton. He walks to the edge of the position and looks through binoculars, although optics are no longer needed. 400 meters of scorched desert. Not a single shot from that side. Not a single movement. The mathematical problem is solved completely. The remainder is 0. This is not a victory. This is annihilation. The erasure of matter from reality. Eileen feels a wave of emptiness rising inside him. He just killed several hundred people in 15 seconds. He didn't see their faces, didn't know their names. He just entered coordinates.
Check the equipment!
His voice sounds hollow, as if from under a pillow.
Prepare to march!
He knows the trucks aren't going anywhere. The engines are likely damaged by the shockwave of their own volleys. The frames are warped. But he must give the order. The order is the only thing holding reality back from disintegration. He takes out his notebook. Fingers disobey, the pencil slips out. He picks it up from the mud. Target destroyed, full expenditure. 2 phrases, the sum of hundreds of people's lives, the price of saving the communications hub. He closes the notebook and looks at the smoking field. It seems to him that the smoke is folding into formulas, integrals that cannot be taken, equations that have no solution in the field of human morality. The silence after the volley possesses physical mass. It presses on the shoulders heavier than crates of shell. The air around the battery no longer trembles from jet streams, but it is saturated with a smell that cannot be weathered by anything. The smell of overheated, dying metal and burnt organics. 4 BBM-13 launchers stand in their earthen pits like skeletons of prehistoric animals found in an excavation. They are dead. Senior Lieutenant Ilian walks around the position. He touches the rail of the lead vehicle. The metal burns even through the canvas mitten. Steel channels calculated for colossal loads are warped. Geometry is violated. The high temperature of the exhaust gases, reflected from the ground when firing at a negative angle, did its job. The paint didn't just burn. It evaporated, exposing gray, scaled steel. The rear wheels of the Studebakers turned into melted black lumps. Rubber did not withstand the proximity to plasma. The wooden sides of the truck beds charred and crumble into dust at a touch. Technically, this is a crime. Julian knows the articles of the regulations by heart. Intentional disabling of combat equipment, sabotage. In wartime conditions, this is a capital offense. He destroyed his battery with his own hands. 4 combat units, each worth thousands of rubles and hundreds of man-hours of factory labor, turned into scrap metal. Yes, he stopped the breakthrough. Yes, German tanks are burning 400 meters from here. But military bureaucracy is a machine running on paper, not meaning. In the ledger, it will be recorded, loss of materiel due to commander's fault. The roar of an engine breaks the cottony silence. A Willys Jeep breaks through to the position. The car bounces over craters, spraying mud. Behind it, a truck with security. Not supply or medics. HQ. Ilian adjusts his belt. His hands are not shaking. Inside is the icy calm of a man who has already accepted his fate. He made a choice between death from a German shell and death from a court-martial verdict. The equation is solved, the result obtained. Only the signature under the total remains. Lieutenant General of Artillery Voronov steps out of the Willys, a monumental figure, even in field uniform. A greatcoat without a single spot, boots shining as if he didn't drive through a swamp, but walked on Kremlin parquet. An adjutant with a folder scurries nearby. Security scatters along the perimeter, encircling the position. Submachine guns on chests, gazes gripping, assessing. They look at the artillerymen not as heroes, but as suspects. Ilian takes a step forward, throws his hand to his cap. He wiped the blood from his nose with his sleeve, but brown smears remain on his tunic. His appearance is non-regulation, wild. "Comrade Lieutenant General, the Guards mortar battery," he begins the report, but his voice breaks into a wheeze, vocal cords burned by powder gases. Voronov doesn't listen. He stops the report with a gesture. He walks to the trucks. His gaze slides over the twisted rails, over the wheels melted into the soil. He sees the pits dug under the rear axles. He is a professional. He doesn't need explanations of what happened here. He sees the technical solution. Artificial lowering of the elevation angle by changing the chassis horizontal. A barbaric, suicidal, genius solution. The general walks to the edge of the position and raises his binoculars. Looks for a long time at the field where German tanks are smoking. Black smoke rises in columns into the gray sky. There, in the field, lies a battalion of Wehrmacht elite, lying in layers, mixed with earth and iron. Voronov lowers the binoculars and turns to Ilian. The general's face is inscrutable. It is the face of a sphinx deciding whom to devour and whom to let pass. "Your work, Senior Lieutenant?" The general's voice is quiet, but in the silence after battle, it sounds like the strike of a gong. "Yes, sir, Comrade Lieutenant General." "I took the decision unilaterally. I bear the responsibility." "Ruined the equipment," Voronov states. It is not a question. It is a fact. He kicks a charred tire with the toe of his boot. It crumbles into soot. 4 vehicles, brand new launchers. You understand what the penalty is for this? Yes, sir. Court-martial. Ilian looks the general in the eyes. He seeks no excuses. He states a fact. In mathematics, there is no place for pleas. There is cause and effect. Voronov is silent. He takes out a cigarette case, removes a Kazbek cigarette. The adjutant instantly offers a lighter. The general inhales, releasing a stream of smoke. The smoke smells of good tobacco, overpowering the smell of burning. Court-martial, you say? Voronov squints. Your arithmetic, Lieutenant, is limping. The general takes a step toward Ilian, closing the distance to personal. Let's count. One Studebaker costs $6,000 by Lend-Lease, plus the launcher. Total, let's say, 25,000 gold rubles per machine. 4 machines, 100,000. He pauses, flicking ash onto Ilian's boot. Now look over there. He waves the hand with the cigarette toward the field. 15 Tiger and Panther tanks are burning there. The cost of one Tiger is 800,000 Reichsmarks, plus crew training, plus fuel, ammunition, plus 2 companies of motorized infantry, plus a strategic communications hub that they failed to capture and which ensures front command. Voronov looks at Ilian like a teacher at a negligent student who forgot to reduce a fraction. If we trade 4 trucks for a tank battalion, I am ready to burn the entire Red Army motor pool to hell. It is a profitable exchange, Lieutenant. It is a cost-effective war. The tension snaps like an overwound string. The security lowers their submachine guns. The adjutant stops writing in the notepad and looks at Ilian with interest.
But it's a pity about the equipment.
Voronov continues, already in a different tone. Businesslike. Engineering. The rails burn. Gases hit the platform. Design flaw. He turns to the adjutant. Write it down. Prepare technical specifications for the design bureau. Develop screw jacks for the front axle so that the nose of the truck can be raised normally without these, he nods at the pits, earthworks. And reinforce the heat shielding of the rail pack. Study Senior Lieutenant Ilian's experience and incorporate it into the combat manual. Section, Direct Fire in Critical Situations. The general looks at Ilian again. Drilled holes for medals on your tunic? No, sir, Comrade General. Didn't have time. Drill them. Order of the Red Banner. For resourcefulness and saving the entrusted line. Voronov throws the butt into the mud. Write off the vehicles as irretrievable combat losses. Send personnel for reformation. You will receive new launchers.
And pray to your god of ballistics, Lieutenant, that the Germans got so close. If they had stopped at a kilometer, your own side would have shot you for panic-mongering. But as it is, winners aren't judged. The general turns and walks to the car. His back is straight, rigid. He solved the equation. He weighed metal and result on the scales of war. The result outweighed. The Willies turns around, blasting Ilian with exhaust. The convoy drives away. Ilian remains standing among his dead machines. He looks at his hands. They are still black with soot. A medal. Instead of execution, a medal. He sits on the running board of a burnt truck. The metal is still warm, like the body of a killed beast. There is something monstrous in this arithmetic. His life, the lives of his soldiers, his freedom, all this depended not on right or wrong, but on the exchange rate of steel for steel. If he had burned the trucks but not stopped the tanks, he would have been shot.
If he had saved the trucks and retreated, he would have been shot. He walked along a razor's edge, where the width of the blade was measured by the thickness of German tank armor. He takes a tobacco pouch from his pocket. Fingers struggle to roll a cigarette. Tobacco spills. The first drag burns his throat, but this smoke seems sweet. It is the smoke of life. He is alive. His men are alive. The communications hub works. Somewhere back there, in the rear, telephone operators are transmitting orders on which the fates of millions depend. And here, on a small patch of scorched Belarusian earth,
His personal battle with regulations ended. Eileen strokes the rough side of the truck. "Thank you," he whispers. Not to the general, to the iron. The iron that died instead of him. This is the essence of war. Things die so that people live a little longer. Metal is a consumable. Man is too. But today the variables aligned in favor of the man. A rare case in the statistics of large numbers.
The exception that proves the rule. May 1945, Berlin. The city ceased to be a geographical point and turned into a pile of broken stone, dust, and twisted metal. The air here is dense, heavy, saturated with the smell of decomposition that even the spring wind cannot overpower. This is not the smell of victory. This is the smell of consequences. The geometry of streets is violated. Straight lines of avenues turned into chaotic curves of rubble. Facades of houses, stripped of walls, grin with gaping holes of apartments, displaying intimate details of a strange, now dead, life. Floral wallpaper, a miraculously intact lampshade, a child's crib hanging over the abyss of the third floor. Captain Nikolai Ilyin sits on the trail of a captured German Flak 88 anti-aircraft gun. The metal is cold, alien, covered in gray Wehrmacht paint. Around him is the Tiergarten. The park is turned into a lunar landscape. Trees that grew here for centuries are splintered into chips by artillery fire. The earth is churned by craters so thickly that it is impossible to find a level place to put a foot. The war is over. This sentence should cause euphoria. Shouts of hurrah, tears, shots into the air from all types of weapons. And they exist. Somewhere over there, at the Reichstag, at the Brandenburg Gate, infantry is dancing to an accordion, drinking captured schnapps and hugging. There is a celebration of survivors. But here, on the edge of the park, it is quiet. Ilyin is not celebrating. He is balancing the books. On his knees lies a battered notebook in an oilcloth binding, the division's combat log. Pages yellowed by time and dampness are covered in indelible pencil. The handwriting changed. At first it was even, teacher-like. Then, near Moscow, it became jerky, sharp as a cardiogram. At Stalingrad, the letters were pressed into the paper with such force they tore the sheet.
Ilyin flips through the pages.
These are not memoirs. This is the ledger of death. Column ammunition expenditure. Column targets hit. He sums it up. It is a mathematician's professional habit to look for the final number. He needs to know the result of the equation he has been solving for 4 years. He adds the numbers. Destroyed batteries, dispersed battalions, burned columns, suppressed pockets of resistance. Strict records were kept in the division. Artillery reconnaissance confirmed every hit. Ilyin runs the lead over the paper, moving his lips. 500, 3,000, 8,000. The final sum crashes down on him heavier than a concrete slab. 15,000. 15,000 people. This is the population of a small district town, like the one where he taught children parabolas and hyperbolas before the war. Imagine a town, schools, a hospital, a fire station, a market, hundreds of houses, parks. And now this town is gone. It is erased, destroyed physically. And he, Nikolai Ilyin, and his subordinates did it. He looks at his hands. Ordinary hands. The skin has roughened. Dirt and gun oil have eaten in and cannot be washed off by anything. On the middle finger, a callus from a pencil. These hands did not strangle. They did not stab with a bayonet. They did not pull the trigger of a machine gun, seeing the enemy's face in the sights. These hands simply moved the cursor of a slide rule. They drew lines on a map. They wrote numbers in a notebook. Abstraction kills more effectively than rage. 15,000 corpses is the result of intellect, not muscle. Ilian tries to grasp the physical volume of this figure. If you lay these bodies in a row, shoulder to shoulder, you get a line 7.5 kilometers long. A road of dead men stretching beyond the horizon. The burden of guilt? No, this is not guilt in the Christian sense. Ilian is a realist. He knows the other side of the scale.
If he hadn't solved these equations, if he had made a mistake in calculations, if his hand had trembled, these 15,000 Germans would have killed 15,000 of his soldiers, or 30,000, or burned another 100 villages along with the inhabitants. This is the mathematics of subtraction. You subtract the enemy from reality to add chances for life to your own. It was the work of a sanitation worker of history. Dirty, bloody, necessary work to clear the space of fascism. He performed it with quality, an A grade. But the heaviness doesn't leave from this knowledge. He looks at ruined Berlin. It is a visual aid on the ballistics of destruction. Here is a house hit by a 152mm shell. The walls collapsed inward, burying everyone in the basement. Physics of a shockwave in an enclosed volume. Here is a Panther tank, torn apart by an internal explosion of ammunition. An 8-ton turret flew 50 meters.
Thermodynamics of gas expansion.
This whole city is one continuous proving ground where theories were tested by practice. And practice showed man is a very fragile construction. His tensile strength is negligible compared to the energy of TNT. A young lieutenant, a platoon leader from command, approaches him. A brand new Order of the Red Star shines on his chest. His face beams. His cap is pushed to the back of his head. In his hands is a bottle of wine. "Comrade Captain, why are you sitting? It's victory! Let's drink! The Fritzes are finished!" Ilian looks at him from below. The captain's eyes are empty, matte, like lenses of old binoculars. The lieutenant falters. The smile slides off his face. He sees before him not a commander, but a man who looked into the abyss of calculation and saw the bottom. 15,000, Ilian says quietly. "What, comrade captain?" The lieutenant doesn't understand. "Nothing. Go, celebrate."
You earned it.
The lieutenant leaves, looking back uncertainly. He doesn't understand. He is 20 years old. He came to the front a year ago. For him, war is an adventure that ended in triumph. For Ilian, war is accounting. He closes the journal. The clap of the cover sounds like a shot. He shoves the notebook into his map case. This document will be turned into the archive. Historians will study tactics, draw diagrams, admire the maneuver of fire. But none of them will smell the scent of these numbers. The smell of burnt meat and sweet corpse rot that is now forever etched into the captain's subcortex. The war is over. The equation is solved. The answer is obtained. But what should a man who is used to creating, not destroying, do with this answer? How will these hands, which killed the population of a city, pick up chalk again? How will he enter a classroom and write on the board, "Let us prove the theorem"? Which theorem? That force equals mass times acceleration?
He proved that in practice.
He saw how the mass of a fragment with gravitational acceleration tears apart a child's body. Knowledge paid for at such a price poisons. Ilian takes out a cigarette, lights up. The smoke mixes with the burning of Berlin. He is alive. This is the main variable that remained in the plus. He will return home. He will hug his wife. He will see cities being rebuilt. But inside him, in the place where a soul used to be, now stands a cold steel mechanism, an arithmometer that never errs. And this mechanism knows the exact price of a human life. Weight, 70 kilograms. Volume, 0.7 cubic meters. Cost, 8 kopecks, the price of a rifle cartridge. Or 100 rubles, the price of a shell. Cheap. Life costs too little in the era of large calibers. Ilian gets up from the trail. His legs buzz with fatigue. He is 30 years old, but he feels like an old man.
He walks over broken brick, away from the park, away from the silence, to where the living are making noise. He needs to learn to be a human again, not a function. But he knows it will no longer be possible to completely erase this formula from memory. 1946. Peace. This word is printed in bold in newspapers, but for Reserve Captain Nikolai Ilian, it has no physical meaning. The war ended de jure with the signing of the surrender and fireworks. De facto, the war moved from the geographical space of Europe into the internal space of one man's skull. The front now runs not along the Elbe, but along the convolutions of the cerebral cortex. And on this front, there is no truce. Ilian is back in school. The same classroom, the same desks painted green, the same portraits of scientists on the walls. Lobachevsky, Kovalevskaya. They look at him sternly and calmly, like people who never saw what shrapnel does to an infantry company on the march. Ilian stands at the blackboard, chalk in his right hand, rag in his left. He writes the problem condition. A train moves from point A to point B at a speed of 60 kilometers per hour. The hand freezes. For the students, these are just numbers. For Ilian, these are input data for firing. Target speed, 60. Lead. A breeze from the open window stirs the curtain, and the brain automatically calculates the correction for shell drift. He squeezes the chalk. Fingers remember not the smooth surface of limestone, but the ribbed steel of aiming hand wheels. Tap, tap, tap. He puts dots on the board, marking the vertices of a triangle. This sound, a dry, short strike of hard on hard. In the silence of the classroom, this sound ruptures eardrums. It is not chalk. It is the clang of the breech of a 122mm howitzer. Metal strikes metal, locking the casing with the charge in the chamber. This sound is the last one an artilleryman hears before pulling the lanyard. The sound signifying irreversibility. Ilian flinches. The chalk breaks. "Nikolai Petrovich, are you feeling unwell?" The voice of the class monitor, a girl with white bows, comes as if from another dimension, through the cotton of a concussion that isn't really there. Outwardly, he is an impeccable teacher. A strict suit he wears with military bearing. Always shaven, fit. Voice calm, diction clear. Students respect and fear him. Parents greet him with reverence. Frontline soldier, medal bearer. They see the facade. They see a hero who returned with victory and now sows the reasonable, the good, the eternal. They do not know that inside this facade, a continuous combustion process is underway. Post-traumatic stress disorder. In those years, such a diagnosis did not exist. There was the concept of shell shock. There was the concept of nervous exhaustion. But no one knew how to treat a soul poisoned by the mathematics of murder. Doctors prescribed rest and sanitariums, but there are no pills for memory. By day,
Ilian holds the defense. Work helps. Algebra, geometry, trigonometry. Science demands concentration, pushing out images of the past. He loads his brain with equations, checking notebooks, lesson plans, so as not to leave a single free megabyte of memory for memories. He builds barricades of formulas. But night comes. Night is the time of defeat. At night, consciousness control weakens, and the subconscious, this dark basement of memory, opens its sluices. 1952. He wakes up not from a sound, but from a smell. The bedroom of the city apartment smells not of lilacs from the street, but of burnt rubber and the sweet stench of decomposition. This smell is so real it causes a gag reflex. Ilian sits up in bed. His heart beats against his ribs, as if it wants to break them. Pulse, 140 beats per minute. Cold, sticky sweat flows down his back. He doesn't just remember, he sees. High-definition hallucinations. Right in front of him, in the corner of the room where the wardrobe stands, he sees a burning Studebaker. He sees the paint melting on the hood. He sees the faces of his soldiers, the very ones he sent into the pits under the wheels in '44. They do not speak to him. They just watch. Their gazes are a silent reproach. "Kolya, what's wrong?" His wife wakes up, touches his shoulder. Her hand is warm, alive. But Ilian recoils. In the first second, he doesn't recognize her. His brain is still there, in the Belarusian swamp. He thinks it's German recon. Reflex demands to search for a weapon. Hand gropes under the pillow, looking for the holster with the TT pistol. It's empty there, only soft down. "Nothing," he croaks. "Sleep, just a dream." He goes to the kitchen, trying not to creak the floorboards. Pours water from a carafe. The glass chatters against his teeth. Water has no taste. He sits by the window and smokes, one cigarette after another. The red ember in the darkness is like a tracer. No one knows about his double bookkeeping. To everyone, he is a math teacher. To himself, he is a serial killer, whose crimes are legalized by the state. 15,000 people. This figure gives him no peace. He tries to rationalize. They were enemies. They came to kill us. I defended the motherland. Logic works during the day. At night, logic is powerless before the physiology of horror. He sees not abstract enemies. He sees details. A torn-off hand with a wedding ring on the finger lying on the snow near Moscow. A black, charred figure of a tanker trying to climb out of the hatch of a burning Tiger. The eyes of a German boy, an anti-aircraft gunner, hit by shrapnel. 1965.
20 years of victory. Jubilee, fanfares, parades, speeches.
Ilian is invited to the presidium of a school assembly. He is given flowers, carnations, red as arterial blood. A pioneer in a tie asks, "Nikolai Petrovich, tell us, how did you beat the fascists? Was it scary?" Ilian looks at the hall, hundreds of children's eyes. They are waiting for a story about a feat, about how he fearlessly stood under fire, about how our side won. What can he tell them? The truth? Tell how he calculated the trajectory to cover an area with maximum density of manpower? Tell what a human looks like turned by a shockwave into a bag of bones? Tell how shit and blood smell in a trench during artillery preparation? No. The truth cannot be spoken. The truth is too toxic for peacetime. "War is hard work, kids," he says the rehearsed phrase. "The main thing was to study well, to know mathematics, to shoot accurately." Applause. He smiles, but the corners of his lips tremble.
He feels like an imposter. He wears a hero's mask, hiding beneath it the face of a man who sees hell every night.
1973. He is aging. Health is failing. The heart, worn out by the adrenaline storms of the 40s, begins to malfunction. Arrhythmia. Doctors listen to his chest and shake their heads. "You have the heart of a very old man," the cardiologist says. "You were too nervous." Ilian chuckles. Nervous? No, he wasn't nervous. He was calculating. And the heart simply worked at maximum RPM, like a Katyusha engine on afterburner. Resource exhausted. Nightmares change. Now he sees not the past, but variants of the future that did not happen. He sees his unborn children who could have been if he had died then, in 44. He sees the children of those Germans he killed. A huge crowd of ghosts stands behind his back when he walks down the street. He is afraid of his memory. Memory is not an archive where folders lie quietly.
Memory is a minefield, where minds drift, changing position. You never know which step will be the detonator. The sound of a falling ruler, the smell of truck exhaust, the flash of welding at a construction site. Any little thing can throw him back to that day when he ceased to be a teacher and became a function of death. He lives in fear that one day he won't return, that one night he will remain there, in burning Stalingrad, and his body will be found in bed in the morning, cold and dead, while his soul wanders forever among the ruins, recounting trajectories. Eileen looks at his hands. They are covered in liver spots, veins swollen in knots. But they still remember the weight of shells. These hands patted children's heads, held chalk, hugged his wife. But under the skin, in muscle memory, they forever remained the hands of a gunner. Loneliness. Total, icy loneliness of a man who knows the price of life, because he wrote out invoices for death himself. He has no one to share this knowledge with. It is too heavy for one, but unliftable for others. He carries this load silently, with a straight back, as befits an officer, even if the war ended 30 years ago. This is his personal, lifelong watch, an equation that cannot be erased from the board. 1983. Park of Culture and Rest. May. Air warmed to 20 degrees. Relative humidity, 40%. Ideal conditions for ballistics, but there is nowhere left to shoot. Nikolai Ilyin sits on a bench. He is 70-something. His tactical and technical characteristics are reduced to a critical level. Vision has fallen. Joints are affected by arthritis. Heart works intermittently, skipping every fifth beat. This is material wear. Fatigue of the metal from which his frame was cast in 41. He looks at passers-by. For him, they are still objects occupying volume in space. But now, he doesn't calculate lead. He calculates probability. What is the probability that this laughing student would exist if in 42, near Stalingrad, a fragment had passed 3 centimeters to the right? Probability approaches 0. War is a giant separator that winnowed out variants of the future. Eileen knows that he was an operator of this separator. A young man approaches the bench, about 30, horn-rimmed glasses, a tube in his hands. An engineer, visible by motor skills, precise, economical movements, attentive gaze. He doesn't look like a military man, but there is that same collectedness in him. Nikolai Petrovich Ilyin? The voice is calm, affirmative. Ilyin nods. He dislikes unexpected contacts. It is a perimeter breach. May I sit? My name is Alexei. I am the grandson of Sergeant Kovalenko, driver of the 3rd vehicle of your battery. Ilyin strains his memory. Kovalenko, 1944, Belarus. Studebaker buried in mud to the frame.
The driver's face smeared with soot, eyes white with tension.
Did he die? Ilian asks dryly.
Died 3 years ago. Heart attack. But he lived 68 years. Alexei sits nearby. He puts the tube on his knees. Grandfather often told about that day, about the pits, about how you forced them to violate regulations. He said that you were not a human then, but the calculating machine, that you saw trajectories right through. Ilian is silent. He waits for an accusation, waits for the bill to be presented now for burnt nerves, for the nightmares his subordinate suffered. I work in a design bureau, Alexei continues. We calculate the strength of load-bearing structures for civil objects, bridges, high-rise buildings. I brought you a drawing to show. He opens the tube and takes out a sheet of Wattman paper, unrolls it. On the paper is a complex web of lines, stress diagrams, force vectors. This is a new bridge across the Ob River.
Grandfather always said, if not for Lieutenant Ilian, I would have been smeared all over the cabin there, and your father wouldn't exist. And you.
Alexei looks Ilian straight in the eye. I calculated, Nikolai Petrovich. It's professional. I estimated the geometric progression. You saved 12 crew members and the communications hub back then. Each of them had children. Those had their own children. In the third generation, that is already about 70 people. Me, my colleagues, my children, we are all the result of that equation you solved in 15 seconds. Ilian looks at the bridge drawing. He sees familiar mechanics, distribution of force vectors, strength of materials. Only here these vectors are directed not at destruction, but at support. This bridge will stand for 100 years. Millions of cars will drive over it. People will rush to work, to maternity hospitals, to dates.
And all this is possible only because once, in September of '44, he correctly calculated the angle of inclination of the rails. For the first time in 40 years, the icy cold inside his chest begins to recede. He was used to counting only subtraction. 15,000 killed enemies. That was his personal bookkeeping of hell. But he forgot about the second part of the equation, about addition and multiplication. Life is not a constant. It is a variable that has the property of exponential growth. Life snatched from death is not just preserved, it multiplies. Thank you, Alexei says, briefly. Man to man, no mushiness. He rolls up the paper, stands up, shakes Ilian's hand. The handshake is firm, dry, warm. Alexei leaves. Ilian follows him with his gaze. He sees not one person. He sees a branching tree of probabilities. Saved Sergeant Kovalenko is the root. Alexei is a branch. The bridge is the fruit. The math finally balanced. The balance is positive. 1987, January, hospital ward.
Outside the window, snow falls, slow and quiet, like that near Moscow in '41. Only now it hides no targets. It covers the world. Nikolai Ilyin lies on the bed. He is not in pain. The body, this old, worn-out mechanism, gradually shuts down life support systems. Blood pressure drops, 60/40. Oxygen saturation decreases. The brain, that steel oblong brain that solved survival problems all its life, is now solving the last problem. The problem of transition from the state of matter to the state of memory. There are no hysterics nearby. His wife holds his hand. She understands everything. An officer's wife knows how to wait and how to see off. Ilyin closes his eyes. The darkness before him is no longer filled with fire and screams. There are no burning tanks and torn bodies in it. There are only numbers in it. But now, these are not target coordinates. These are life coordinates. He sees a huge, glowing formula,
An integral over a closed contour. 15,000 lives taken on the left, but on the right, infinity. Infinity of born, built, created. The saved communications hub in 44 transmitted an order that saved a division. The division saved a city. The city gave birth to a generation that flew into space. The chain does not break. The butterfly effect. Only instead of a butterfly's wing, the strike of a rocket. He was not a killer. He was a surgeon. He amputated gangrene so the organism would live. Yes, it was dirty. Yes, it was bloody. But the patient, humanity, is alive. Breathing becomes shallow. Pauses between breaths lengthen. Arrhythmia is replaced by a flat line on the monitor. The beep of the device is not an alarm signal. It is the signal of the end of the shift. Work is done. Shells are expended. Barrels have cooled. Nikolai Ilyin, math teacher, senior lieutenant, captain, pensioner, leaves into the silence.
This is not that oppressive silence after a volley that pressed on ears in Belarus. It is the silence of great equilibrium. Zero. Period. Absolute peace. War is the mathematics of death. But life is a mathematical anomaly that disproves any statistics of destruction. Ilyin proved this with his existence. His equation is solved correctly. Answer: life.